Hi guys, slight different video today. I'm going to go back to doing sort of a waffle type video, and today we're going to talk about all-in-one flight controller and ESCs, and a couple of other things as well. And I kind of wanted to make this video because on a lot of other channels I've seen other pilots and reviewers recommending these type of boards to new pilots because they're relatively easy to solder up and put in a new build. And the purpose of this video is really just to give you an alternative point of view, because I really strongly disagree with the people who are telling new pilots to look at these type of all-in-one boards. I'm saying this for a number of different reasons. The number one reason is the more components you cram into a tiny little board, in my experience, the more issues you will potentially have. And those issues range from odd twitches to electrical noise, lines in your FPV feed, etc, etc. But the biggest one for me is people seem to recommend these because they're on face value, they appear to be cheap. These two here, this is the Lumineer Alpha, and this is the Hobby King Multi-Star 32-bit, which is essentially the same thing. The one I haven't got is the Racewire F4S or whatever it's called, which they're doing a few versions. They do the 32-bit, which is the same as these two guys, and they do the standard one in an F3 and an F4 board, which tends to end up in a lot of newcomers' builds. And on face value, these boards look like good value for money. I think the Racewire 32-bit one goes for about 52 quid. This guy sells for about 70 quid. And this guy, believe it or not, cost me 33 quid on a Hobby King sale. It usually retails for £42, I think. So it's 10 quid cheaper than the Racewire one. And you get free Royal Mail 48-hour delivery as well. So if it works the same as the Racewire one, which it should do because it's the same board, it's a better buy. But the problem with these guys, and certainly if you're a new pilot, is if you have an issue, what do? You know, if it doesn't work out of the box, then you contact Banggood or whoever and they'll probably send you another one. But diagnosing a fault becomes really difficult when you've got an all-in-one, because if you were using single ESCs or even a 4-in-1 ESC and a separate flight controller, it becomes very easy to narrow down where your problem's coming from, whether it's the flight controller, whether it's the ESC, whether you've got some noise coming from one place or another, because you can chop and change components a lot easier. And if you take, and the easiest way to do it and to make a build is to use separate ESCs, because if one of your motors stops working, it's very easy just to switch an ESC and see if it's the ESC at fault or the motor, etc., and diagnose backwards. And this is the reason why you see a lot of really experienced pilots using separate ESCs, separate PDBs, separate flight controllers, because they know from their experience that if they're out flying and they hit an issue, it's much quicker to diagnose and fix the issue if you're using a lot of separate components. If you're out flying and you hit an issue with something like this, or even if you're in your garage or whatever and you hit an issue something like this, if there's a problem, the whole thing is toast and you've just wasted 60 or 70 quid. And that applies to the Asgard, the Nox, the Lumineer Alpha and the Hobby King 30 amp 4-in-1 as well. And that's really what I'm trying to say on this video, is that while this might look great value at 42 quid, and while this might look like a cool idea at 60 odd quid, and the same for this, in the long run, people seem to buy these because it saves them 10 or 15 minutes soldering and building, and they think it makes it easier. But in the long run, if this breaks, you've just thrown 60 or 70 quid in the bin. If a single ESC breaks, you've thrown 8, 10, 12 quid in the bin, and it'll take you a few minutes to change this. This involves rebuilding your quad, as do the rest of them. So you've got to take it entirely apart, resolder everything, essentially build the thing again. So what you're saving going in, you're longer term, you know, increasing the amount of work that you that you do. And you know, if we take something like this, even at 42 quid, at that price, it's immense value for money. You know, 4 ESCs from SpeedX or a reputable brand will probably cost you about 35 quid, and it'll probably cost you about 25 quid for a flight controller, so 60 quid in total. So on face value, you've saved yourself, you know, 10, 15, 20 quid. But longer term, you just cause yourself a huge amount of hassle. And just to show you, this is the Asgard that was in my Featherlight 190. Okay, and I really like this board. I think it's one of the better ones. It's got a really nice slim profile, so while it's wide, it's actually relatively easy to fit in most quads because you don't have a lot of height to it. After a crash with the Featherlight 190, I took it apart and I noticed this, which is a huge burnt area on the bottom of the board. And I don't actually know what, even to be honest with you, what was there. And the board still works, but it's not really flyable with whatever that component was. There must have been a fire that I didn't even notice. So essentially, if I'd have bought this, and thankfully I didn't, I've just thrown 65, 70 quid down the drain. This was the Lumineer Alpha, which 360 Hobbies kindly sent me. And at the time, I said I probably wouldn't put it in the 3-inch build because I felt it was a bit too much. You know, you only need 20 amp ESCs in a 3-inch build, and this would be better on something bigger. So when I had the issues with the 4-in-1 ESC on my hyperlow CG, temporarily while I was waiting for a different component, I popped this in to find that it had a faulty gyro and accelerometer. And basically the quad, if you gave it a left stick, it would kind of suddenly jar and flip. And I messed around with this. I tried different firmwares, different settings, and the bottom line is Betaflight shows it clearly, is that the gyro is just screwed in this. So if I'd have spent 60 or 70 quid on this, I'd have had to go back to whoever I bought it from. Please sir, can I have a new one, and hope for the best. This is the Nox, which I really like the look of, and it does feel super quality. But when you look at it closely, it's a really difficult board to use because it's so thick. It's kind of, you end up at the point as to where would you use this. It's a 20 by 20 mounting, so you'd want to use it in a really tight build with a 20 by 20 stack. But because it's so thick, why would you use this over just separate components? And the fact that it weighs 21 grams, I think, it's pretty much the same weight as a 4-in-1 ESC and a flight controller anyway. So for all intents and purposes, you may as well just get yourself a standard 4-in-1 ESC and a flight controller and just build the stack close together, and you'd probably end up in pretty much the same place. And the benefit of doing that is if your flight controller toasts or one of your ESC toasts, you can just replace one component as opposed to spending 60, 70 quid or whatever these cost on that. So if you're an experienced pilot, go ahead, use whatever you want to use. You won't hear any complaints from me, but this video is really just to try and make the newcomers to this hobby sort of open their eyes a little bit and realise that while it's really easy for a channel to flog, you know, the Racer Star version of this because it makes for a quick, simple, clean build, are you not better buying separate ESCs, you know, a flight controller that has a built-in PDB and building that way? Or are you not better, you know, if you want a 4-in-1 ESC, getting a decent 4-in-1 ESC from SpeedX or Aikon or one of those manufacturers, and again getting a separate flight controller? And while it might cost you an extra few quid going in and a little bit more soldering, this hobby is built around soldering. soldering is part of this hobby and there's no way around that. Stuff breaks, your camera wires get ripped off, you have to solder. So saving yourself 10 minutes soldering when you're building your quad by going down one of these will basically give you a lot more hassle later down the line. So that really, the question to end this on is, why did I recently buy this? Because there are some builds where the standard components just won't do the job. And I bought this simply because, well, A, this failed, simply because it cost me 33 quid, and at that price it was worth a punt. And I wanted to put this, or I'm going to put this if it works, in the Vert Racer. And the reason I'm doing this and going against my own advice is because I've got a lot of quads and I can afford to take a punt and use one of these components. And if it goes wrong or it fails, then on my own head be it won't stop me from flying, because I've still got other quads that I can fly beside it. But the reason I'm using it is because I want to build the hyperlow Vert Racer in a 10mm configuration, and the only way I can get a 10mm build without going to huge expense is to use this guy, and that is what I'm going to do. So to close this up, my own personal advice is, if you're building a standard quad, whether it be a racer or a big freestyle quad, ignore all of these. Go for separate ESCs if you can do so, or if you prefer, or you must have a 4-in-1 ESC, then go down that route. Only look at these if you're trying to do something really specific. So you're trying to build an ultra sort of tight stack, or you're chasing some sort of goal. You know, this made perfect sense on the Featherlight 190, because he was trying to build a super light quad. He didn't have much room, and this was a good option for it. You know, this will be, if it works, will be a good option for my Vert Racer, even though it's got the USB in the wrong place and I'll end up covering it up. I can simply work around that and change everything in Betaflight. This, not really sure. I mean, it looks, as I said, immense quality, and it's got 30 ampere Cs and, you know, BL Heli 32. It's got telemetry. This thing has got pretty much everything, but for most builds I'm just not sure why you would use it. And I've updated my notes on this when I did the overview. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that opens somebody's eyes. The simplest things are often not the best, and diagnosing a fault on any of these is A, very difficult, and B, likely to end you up throwing it in the bin, which is what I'll be doing with this guy if I can't get anywhere with it. Last thing I just quickly want to talk about is, for a while I've been after Racewire, which is the white noise stuff. And Racewire is basically a little PCB that sits along the arm of your quad and allows you to switch your motors really easy. And the reason I wanted it is I tend to switch motors pretty regularly, testing new stuff out. But in the UK I haven't been able to get hold of it for less than 10 quid plus delivery. And at that price it was just simply too expensive to warrant. I did notice that Drone Is Life have got some for £6.95 recently, but at that price it's just too expensive for a punt. So Banggood recently appeared with this, which is, what is it, Lampion. And it looks pretty much the same as Racewire. I'm guessing these just snap. Yeah, so there's a snap off. So the idea of this is, this essentially just replaces a length of wire running to your 4-in-1 ESC from your motors, and you solder your motor wires there and the wires coming out of your ESCs onto here. And it basically means if you bust a motor, etc., when you're flying, you just desolder three points, change your motor, solder back on again without having to mess around and take your quad apart. And these were $2.95 on Banggood, and I apologise for buying a clone, but because I don't live in America, there's just no way for me to get hold of white noise Racewire at a good price, and it's just not worth paying 12 or 13 quid for something that does something like that. And I've got a few ideas with this. If we take something like this, which is my Vert Freestyle, something like this would be pretty nifty just to sit along the arm, and it's pretty much exactly the right size, and it would give a little bit of a cleaner build than having wires running down and round. But one of the main reasons I'm really looking for it is, as I said, I like to change motors and swap things around. And when I bust the, or when it stopped, when the Airbot 4-in-1 ESC on my hyperlow CG stopped working, I thought, going back to what I just said in my advice on the all-in-ones, I thought I want this quad to basically be my everyday quad, my worker. And on that basis I rebuilt it with separate ESCs. And when I rebuilt it, I basically tanked it up to make it as indestructible as humanly possible, because if all my other quads break and blow up and all the rest of it, I want this guy to still be running. So it's got separate ESCs, got ESC covers, it's got arm protectors on it, and it's now got T-Motor F60s on. And the reason for that is I didn't want to cut the wires on my Mr. Copper motors, and because these T-Motor F60s were already soldered up to the Aikon ESCs, it was just easier for me to pop these in. But moving forward in my builds, if these work really well, what I'll probably do on builds where I'm using a 4-in-1 ESC is just use these instead. And I like them a lot because I've got tons of motors with cut wires. And I really like the idea of just making my life easier. The other thing is, shortly I've got a race frame coming, which comes with 3 and 5 inch arms, and I kind of at the back of my mind I've kind of got an idea, if I can do it, that if I use this stuff and I build the quad in such a way that it will run 2205s and 2206s on a 5-inch build, and 1407s etc. on a 3-inch build, if I was to use Racewire, there might be a way that I can switch between 3 and 5-inch arms at a whim, and essentially just have 4 of these on the 5-inch arms, another 4 on the 3-inch arms, and just solder 3 wires when I want to change it over. So yeah, so that's today's Waffle video. In terms of the hyperlows, still love this guy. It's been absolutely bulletproof. It's been through the mill, it's been crashed and bashed, nothing has broken or even shown any signs of fading. The Vert Freestyle, when I first flew it on the Gep RC 5040s, it felt a little bit loose and I wasn't really getting much of the sensation I expected to get. However, when I looked at the video, I was going a lot faster than I expected, which is probably down to the slim arms. But on a whim yesterday, I put some cyclones on it, and it literally came alive. I could really sort of start to feel the benefits of it. It felt really, really quick going forward, but the slim profile and mid-mount kind of made the quad feel really sort of liquid and smooth when it was rolling, etc. And I noticed when I was sort of turning sharply in to go through a gap, it felt like it turned in easier. It didn't sort of drag out wide as much as the CG. So there are definite merits to this frame. But I think my initial conclusions were right. If you want one quad and you want it to be serviceable and easy to manage and maintain, then the CG is a better frame. But if you're an experienced builder and you run a few quads, this is definitely something to look at, because I think if you want a fast freestyle quad, there's definite merit to it. So I'm really chuffed with both of these. So I think that is it for today. As I said, I'm going to put this in the Vert race quad and see how I get on with it. But if you do buy these, make sure you connect them to your computer first and just make sure that everything seems to be working all okay, because a lot of shops are really leery about accepting returns if you've already soldered stuff. So obviously there's some stuff you can't test without soldering it, but just connect it up and make sure that everything looks like it's working, the accelerometer, etc. in Betaflight. Anyway, hope that was useful for anybody. Give me a shout if you've got any questions, and otherwise, cheers guys, thanks, bye bye.